My name's Howard Storm, and I'm with Cory, and we are um, continuing our conversations. We just did a summary of my book, My Descendant to Death, and now we looking at the possibility of doing some topical videos on some of the questions that Cory's been getting a lot of, and things that are of interest to us that we'd like to talk about. So we're going to talk about the evidence for why we believe what we believe. And I think this is a really important topic because some people think that the decision to have faith in something is purely emotional. And absolutely, positively, emotions play an important part in all this. As human beings, our emotions oftentimes control our behavior and our decision making. But there's another part of it too, which is the rational part, the reasoning part. And I think that that's really important to talk about, not just our feelings, although those two things are intermingled. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. I think there's a lot of evidence for faith in God. And I believe that God came to us in the person of Jesus. So when I talk about God, my understanding of God is based on Jesus Christ. And I've had a lot of evidentiary reasons for believing in that. I was an atheist before my near-death experience. I didn't believe in God and I didn't believe in Jesus. And I was a real hardcore atheist, and all of my friends were atheists. I didn't hang out with Christians because I didn't want to deal with them, and I had plenty of friends that supported my belief system, which is that life's short and sweet and then you die and that's it. You just sort of went and you went for your own gratification, and that's what life was about. The interesting thing is that I had, and all of my friends did, we had some real irrational antipathy, hatred, disgust, anger towards Christianity. And we used to express that quite a bit. Now, for a group, we were all my friends were basically mostly college professors. For a group of quote, highly educated, rational people, where did this all come from? Well, it was emotional, and I suspect, although I'm not a psychiatrist and I never did a, in-depth analysis of myself or my friends at that time, I think that people experience traumas about religion, maybe having it shoved down their throat in an extremely unpleasant way. Maybe it was a experience that really traumatized them, possibly as a child or maybe later in life. Maybe an experience at church with a family member, etc. One of the big topics in the recent past has been child molesters in the church and positions of authority, pastors, priests, Sunday school teachers, etc. But also it also could be like a deeply religious relative, who molested the child, and then that child, turned that anger towards God, towards religion, towards Jesus. Anyways, it's pretty easy to sense the anger. And it's funny because there's a number of people that have written books, atheists who have written books, basically attacking primarily Christianity. They don't typically aren't going after Hinduism or Islam or Buddhism or Shintoism or any other religion. It's that these people like express their anger towards Christianity. One of the great examples is Friedrich Nietzsche, the philosopher. He was very, very hate-driven about Christianity. And one of his famous lines is, "God is dead." So there's a lot of contemporary people, I'm not going to name their names, but you may be familiar with who they are, who are actually creating kind of an occupation of being Christian bashers. And, one has to, they say a lot of irrational things and erroneous things, which really discredits them, when they're trying to make their case against Christianity, because they say stuff that's just patently untrue. Like, I'll give you one example, like, quote, "All wars were started by religious people." That's not true. And I don't even want to go into it because it's such a ridiculous statement. Wars are started by conquerors, people who want to dominate and take over other people. They may use religion, to sort of win support amongst their people, but they aren't religious at all. I mean, you consider Hitler to be a religious guy, Joseph Stalin, Mao Zedong, I don't. But there are people that do use religion to justify their need to conquer and dominate. Anyhow, so why do rational people choose Christianity? There's a lot of choices. There's the whole buffet of religions out there. Let me first say that, like, Christianity is pretty vast. There's supposedly about 2.5 billion Christians in the world. So there's all kinds of Christianity, and some of it I don't like at all. I think it's horrible. But that would be really a very, very tiny minority of Christians. So when I'm talking about my understanding of Christianity, I'm talking about what's called mainline. So by mainline, I'm talking about the well-known and big denominations. And of course, the biggest would be the Roman Catholic Church. And then there would be the Orthodox Church, which has many different branches, like there's the Russian Orthodox Church and the Greek Orthodox Church and the Serbian Orthodox Church, etc. And then there's Protestantism, which is the diversity is not hundreds, not thousands, tens of thousands. There's tens of thousands of different kinds of Protestants. There's Protestant churches, which are those 12 people. They're just they aren't affiliated with anybody. They're just this one little church, and they're completely independent. And there's lots of those. So actually, there's more than tens and tens of thousands of different sort of flavors. But so what I'm talking about is, and hopefully I am trying to represent mainline Christianity as I understand it. I went to seminary for 3.5 years, and I've been reading about it and studying it ever since. So hopefully, my opinions are based on a consensus of what mainline means. So let's start off with God. There's a wonderful video that you can watch, 5 minutes for reasons to believe in God, and it's written by an Israeli theoretical physicist who got his doctorate from Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and he lives in Israel. Highly educated man, seems like a pretty good guy. He made this little 5-minute video, and I highly recommend that you look at it. It's on YouTube. And his point is that he says, now I'm trying to quote him accurately, all theoretical physicists in the whole world know that all the laws of physics, all the laws of the physical universe existed before the Big Bang. Now, I believe in the Big Bang. All theoretical physicists believe in the Big Bang. And I think that the Bible also asserts the Big Bang, where it says that God spoke the universe into being. And he said that knowing and creation and consciousness of all of the physical laws of the universe that existed before the Big Bang, he said, that's what we call God. It's an incredible piece of evidence. Like, when I went to seminary, one of the points that our theology professors tried to make to us is that God is so great, God is so vast, so beyond human comprehension, that God is a mystery. So how do we know that there is a God, and how do we know what God is? Well, one of the ways is look around the world and say, how did this happen? Where did this all come from? Why is it the way it is? And it's not irrational to think there must be some kind of mind. There must be some kind of plan. There must be some kind of design. I don't know who or what that is, but there's got to be something behind highly structured. One of the things that's interesting about science is that they are discovering that everything is very, very structured and reasonable. It's not haphazard at all. Jesus talked about it, like he said things like, consider the lilies of the field. Just go look at the flowers, look at the birds, the bees, etc. Anyways, so one of the ways that we know God in our very, very limited understanding of God, and I'm going to mention that a lot, our limited understanding, is by the creation. Another way that we know God is through reason. Like, for example, reason tells us that cause and effect is a universal truth. Everything happens, every effect, every result comes from a cause. Things don't just happen. They happen for a reason, a cause. And so if you believe in good, if you believe in beauty, if you believe in love, if you believe in human progress, what's behind all that? What's the cause? And so part of what faith in God is about saying, there's something behind all this. And on a personal level, there's something in my life moving me forward to be better, wiser, kinder, more loving. For example, I believe that love is the most important thing in the world. And if you were to search the world of literature, all literature, poetry, religious literature, historical literature, biblical literature, scientific literature, you can never find a really good definition of love. Love is mysterious. It's not lust, and don't make the mistake of like, yeah, well, we love because we just want to, have sex and mate and stuff like that. No, that's not what I'm talking about, that kind of love. There can be love in the desire to, procreate, but people have said that that's all we're about. All we're interested in is procreating. It's not true. Procreating might be important, but love is a lot more. It's just that I love a lot of people, and I have no interest in. I love Cory, and Cory and I are not going to be having any kind of intimate romantic relationship. Neither of us are interested in that at all. So how can I love a guy who lives in Nova Scotia and I live in Kentucky, and we have a lot of good conversations and we really like each other. What do you call that? Well, I call it love. And I'm not ashamed to say that I love the guy. And there's a lot of men that I love, and there's a lot of women I love, and there's nothing lustful about any of this at all. And the Bible says, quote, God is love. So I think that somehow it's built into us to experience love, to know love, and to seek love. Where's that coming from? Because the source of it is mysterious and nobody can explain it. They can explain all these intimate details of the subatomic particles, but nobody knows how to explain what love is. And it's more than just a warm, fuzzy feeling, because like people give their lives for it, soldiers, because they love their country, literally put themselves in front of guns and bombs and things like that, knowing full well that there's a high probability they're going to die because they love their country and they want to preserve their country against what they perceive as the threat against it. And that's, of course, going on right now in the world. And you know what? Love's powerful because, like, we see examples like today of small countries resisting and defeating big, powerful countries because the people really love their country, and the invaders aren't motivated with the same kind of love. Use a contemporary example. My mother's from Finland. And when Russia invaded Finland in 1939, the Finns more or less defeated them because they loved a little country, with very few resources and a small population, and they beat off a gigantic invasion by the Russian army. And we're kind of seeing a repeat of that right now in recent history. So love is very powerful. Very, very powerful. People are willing to die for love and sacrifice their lives for love. Once again, referring back to Jesus, he stated that love is the most important thing in the world. This is my commandment. Love one another as I have loved you. And he also showed his love by sacrificing his life on the cross for us, dying for us, suffering and dying for us, and forgiving our sins, and then 3 days later being raised up. Love is a powerful, powerful evidence for believing in God and believing in a religion that emphasizes love. So I judge religions by how much they emphasize love. And if people's interpretation of their religion, or if the founder of that religion's idea is about conquest, power, etc., and not about loving, I dismiss them. I think they're mistaken, misguided, delusional, or even possibly evil. I don't want to have anything to do with them. So that's what I think mainline Christianity is talking about, is the power of love and the importance of love. So those are some of the interesting thing about Christianity is, if you look at it historically, it makes no sense that it exists at all. So we have more evidence for the existence of Jesus of Nazareth, the man, than we do for almost all historical figures. We have accounts written by people who were first and second generation disciples of Jesus, written down and passed on to us. And one of those accounts that people often cite is Josephus, who was a Jewish historian who talks about Jesus as an actual person. But his disciples write about him in lots and lots of detail. And if you check the sources of the biographies of historical figures that were written by, quote, their contemporaries, those were mostly compiled hundreds of years later. Like, we don't have any contemporary sources for Alexander the Great. None. Those were all written, centuries later, and you go on and on and on and on. But we do have, like I said, first hand and second generation people who got their information from the witnesses. And of course, one of those first-hand accounts that I admire very much is Paul. Paul had an encounter with Jesus, the resurrected Jesus, and he spent many years working with and talking with and learning from the people who were Jesus's disciples. Paul lived and worked with people like Peter, Jesus's number one disciple, so most of the New Testament, the majority of the New Testament, is written by Paul, and he was a zealous follower of Jesus Christ, both from his personal experience and from his contact with other Christians who knew Jesus personally. So, one of the disputes about Jesus, well, that stuff was all written hundreds of years later, and it's all made up and it's all propaganda, stuff like that. That's not true. That is a lie. There's tons of really good. Now, whether you like what they say or whether you agree with what they say, that's for you to dispute. But the historical fact is we have really good sources. But the part that I think is amazing is Jesus was from a little tiny town, Nazareth, up in Galilee, northern Israel. And people were very contemptuous of his birthplace and where he grew up. They used to make fun of him because he was a Galilean and he was from like this little, one horse town, no stoplight town called Nazareth. In Jesus' day, there were somewhere between 200 and 500 people in that little village. I mean, it was really small and poor and of absolutely no significance whatsoever. How he got educated, because Jesus, I mean, if you read his stuff, he's obviously brilliant and highly educated. We can pretty much be sure, based on what people said, he was fluent. Of course, his native language would have been Aramaic. That's the common language that they would speak at the time. He was fluent in Hebrew because he read from the Torah and the synagogues. We have records of that. And he uses Greek words. So apparently he knew Greek as well, or knew some Greek, because he uses Greek words. And how did he get educated in this little bitty town? And then how did he attract followers? Because one of the things that's interesting about his life is that he was mobbed by, and I'm not talking about dozens, and I'm not talking about hundreds, I'm talking about by thousands. And there's records where, he's in a crowd, 5,000 men, and they didn't count the women and children. So like, it wouldn't be much of a stretch of imagination to assume that crowd was like 10,000 or more, another crowd's 3,000, when he entered into Jerusalem, a week before the crucifixion, a huge crowd welcomed into the city, proclaiming him King of the Jews. He was such a threat to the corrupt powers that be that ran Israel, and such a threat to the Roman Empire that they had for a long time been plotting to kill him, and they did. So they were afraid of his rising popularity. He was a big threat to their power. So this little nobody from nowhere, in a short ministry of at most 3 years, but maybe less than that, rose to such prominence. So they wiped him out, and then they went after his disciples and tried to wipe them out. And the Roman Empire for a couple hundred years had a policy of like annihilating Christians. And as a consequence of their attempt to eradicate it through horrible murder, feeding Christians to the wild animals and crucifying and stuff like that, the consequence of that was it grew and grew and grew. Weird. Lots of peoples and lots of ideas have been wiped out through persecution, but Christianity, instead of being wiped out, grew and spread throughout the entire Mediterranean, and then ultimately up into Europe, and then down into Africa, and then to Asia, and throughout the whole world. Why did it grow? How did it grow? And then one of the things that was a big turning point in Christianity was the Emperor Constantine, because of a miraculous thing that happened to him, decided to support Christianity and not only ended the persecution of Christians, but made it sort of the favored religion, which wasn't necessarily very popular, but he supported it, and Christianity became, in pretty short time, historically speaking, the religion of the Roman Empire and of Europe, and grew some more. It's the largest religion in the world. And to be frank, I hope that there'll come a time when all people will value, respect Christianity and what Jesus taught. And my hope is that even all people will have a relationship with Jesus Christ in time. And I think it'll be a better world. If you look at not religion, but what Jesus taught, what don't you like about it? You know, if you want evidence about whether Christianity is a good thing or a bad thing, look at the source, which is the Gospel of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Look at them carefully and what Jesus said and what he taught. And what's your criticism? Because I would like to argue in Jesus's favor that what he taught was not only good, but it's the best. And frankly, I'm highly biased, think that it's superior to all the other theologies of all other religions. Now, one thing that I want to state very clearly is I became a Christian because I met Jesus June 1st, 1985. And he brought me back to life and gave me a new heart and a new understanding. I've said this many times in my talks. I died June 1st, 1985. Every doctor I have talked to, and I've talked to a lot of them about my medical situation, said I should have died. And I don't say it, the doctors say it. They said it's a miracle you're alive. Well, the miracle is Jesus gave me a new life. So my evidence for Jesus was he's real. I know him. He talked to me then. He talks to me now. And he's been consistently loving, kind, and patient with me. And I like to think of Jesus as my best friend. Now, that may sound a bit presumptuous, but he's my best friend. He's the one that I ultimately rely on for everything. And his spirit lives in me. It's called the Holy Spirit. It's called the Spirit of Christ. It's called the Spirit of God. It's called the Spirit. And that is what I try to base my life on. And I'm talking about day to day, hour to hour, minute by minute. I try to be guided by the Holy Spirit. I wish I was perfect in doing that. I am not, but I try. And I know that because Jesus told me it pleases him when we try. And he doesn't expect us to be perfect because he knows human nature all too well. And he knows that we mess up. Now, there have been a number of really good books written about the evidence for Jesus Christ. One of them is The Case for Christ. That was written by a reporter in Chicago who was an atheist. And his wife was a Christian, so he decided to do some investigative research into why there was no evidence for Jesus. And after he did the research, he came to the conclusion that there was enough evidence to write a book, and he became a Christian. Cory has just informed me of a similar book called Person of Interest. Maybe Cory will talk about it a little bit. He's reading it right now. I have not read it yet, but he says it's also a person who's wasn't a believer and wanted to investigate Christianity to disprove it, and instead it convinced him that it's legitimate. So there's lots of good researches out there. There's been many people that have written books about why Christianity is real. Josh McDowell wrote a book about this, and one of the lines that he uses, and I think he got this from C.S. Lewis, that if you want to look at Jesus Christ as the Son of God, there's three primary ways that you can approach it. Lunatic, liar, or Lord. And first one is Jesus, a wacko, a madman, and believed that he was the Son of God and that he was, divine and stuff like that. Look at what he did and what he said. I don't think it supports the lunacy idea at all. Matter of fact, in my opinion, Jesus was the most rational human being that's ever lived. The most sane person that ever lived. He was so far ahead of his time that he's still ahead of it. 2,000 years later, he's still ahead of his time. We haven't caught up to him. Liar. Okay. So if he was a liar, what did he gain? What was his motivation for making up all these lies? Was it wealth? No. He never owned anything. Was it power? No. He was powerless by choice. Was it fame? What if he was just this incredible con artist, scam artist? What was he after? Because those people are always after something. What was Jesus after? Because he, okay. So that ends up at Lord.
There's only, I don't want to cut you short, but the video is going to shut off here in about 15 seconds.
Okay.
Or sorry, 45 seconds. So
I believe there's plenty of evidence that Jesus is who he said he was.
Yeah. I believe he's Lord myself. The other one's lunatic and liar. No, I don't think there's enough evidence to back it up. But I don't want the video to cut off on you while you're midway through. So if you have anything you want to say.
No, I think that was a good conclusion.
Okay, great. So if you're interested, I'm just going to let people know that we might be doing a live Q&A with you. So we'll come up with something on that, and I'll send out a link to whoever might be interested in that. But if you still want to continue on with some topical videos in the meantime, that would be great too. I'll let you decide that. And just let me know when you're available for the next